Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those of you around the world. Welcome to the daily Trade the Chain crypto update, where we give you everything you need to know for the next 24 hours and hopefully the next few days. Today is Monday, January 8th. We are in the second week of the new year, and crypto market is lifting a little bit since, being mostly flat since mid next week. Total crypto market cap up to 1.67 trillion, 1.5% increase. Bitcoin up 2%, ETH up close to 2%. Bitcoin sentiment 80 out of 100, ETH sentiment 60 out of 100. Both still bullish. Average daily sentiment across all cryptos is in that neutral territory, but still, above 50. Total tweet volume has decreased, oddly enough, but total trading volume still above that 70 billion number. We are still, mixed results on stablecoin exchange net flows, but are seeing some more inflows after some outflows this morning and inflows last night. So mostly even on that, nothing too concerning, but still got some crap coins running. ARRR, BTU, big time keep. Rev is really kicking butt right now. So let's continue to move forward. And of course, Wednesday is expected to be the ETF announcement. Gary Gensler has tweeted suggestions if you're considering investing in crypto assets. He's been kind of tweeting these kind of disclosures or suggestions over the past couple of months, and the ETF analysts James Seifert and Eric Balkunas both point to this as being, pointing in the likelihood of an ETF approval. Because typically he's done these for other large, product introductions for other types of industries and products. So definitely a good sign. Although we do, have our feelings about Gary. This is a good sign for possible approval on Wednesday. And then Kate Rooney on CNBC has reported that looks like Wednesday now for Bitcoin ETF decision expected to be approved. So more good news in reference to a Wednesday approval. So right now that is the assumption. I'll talk a little bit more about what we expect from, when I get to Bitcoin and ETH, but more or less, grand scheme of things, probably going to be up, back down, and then come back right around to where price was before the ETF. So jump up, slide down, and then come right back up to where price was prior to ETF announcement would be my best guess for a summation of the move. So let's move over to Bitcoin sentiment. Mostly still bullish, obviously continuing to increase into the middle of the week. Definitely a good sign. ETH sentiment, very neutral, very topsy-turvy, but also is increasing into the Wednesday possible approval. Tweet volume for ETH is down though, and Bitcoin has been picking up most of that action. So people are definitely, and this could probably be just people tweeting Bitcoin often because they're talking about Bitcoin ETF approval. And if you're talking about Bitcoin ETF approval, you have to mention Bitcoin in there. So probably going to be a lot more activity towards Bitcoin as we get into Wednesday. So let's kind of look a little bit at TradFi. Remember we talked about this right here. If it jumped up to this level, we wanted to see 103.2 reject. We obviously got that rejection. We're now back beneath 102.4. So definitely a good sign for risk assets. Now, the one next level that I would look out for to hold, and that's an ugly line, but would probably be this 101.7, 101.8 level. It's that next low. So if we break beneath that low, we will then slide back down to 101. And that's what you want to see if you are an equities and crypto bull. So it does look like we are going to drop back down to that 101.8, 101.7 number. And then from that level, right around here, we will either jump up or jump down as exampled by the two arrows that we had there before. So the good news is the XY dropping is good for equities and crypto. So, we want to continue to see that. That does look like a pretty gross rejection. We've seen this type of action before, typically led to new lows. Let's hope that is the case here. Equities, reached a very precarious area last week and obviously into this morning. We did break below, this 46.93 level, but then we jumped right back up. Then we hovered right around it. And now we are back above that level. We told the TTC community if it broke above 47.06, Actually, I think it was around 4,700 because that happened about 9 a.m. So yeah, it would have been about 4,700. Then it would run up to about 4,722. Obviously, we are above that. So staying above this 1 hour estimated 200 moving average should lead us up to 47.48, 47.50. So if the current level of 47.25 holds, I would expect 47.48 next. If the current level of 47.25 fails, then I would expect us to drop right back down to 46.93, 4,700, which is where we started the day. Obviously, downside targets below 46.93 drop down to 46.80-ish. Below 46.80 drop to 46.63. Below 46.63 drop to 46.42. So things are looking good for equities right now. But we did form a lower low, right? So, the chances of forming a lower high are increased, and I would expect to form a lower high. If we were to form a lower high, it would either be here, which is current level, or up near 47.50, between 47.50 and 47.60. So right around this level right here. So we definitely want to continue to see this rise, do something like this, and then get back up to this equal high. And then hopefully form a higher high, because then we can kind of continue to keep market structure intact if that is the case. Right now, things are potentially worrying. If we form a lower high, then we will have this lower low, and market structure would point to probably grabbing 46.43, maybe 4,600 in the near term. So definitely want to see equities eventually, it can be choppy, it can be messy, but we want to see it jump back up to 47.95. If we do not make it up there, we will then form a lower high, and then market structure is officially shifted, and we would do something like this, right? Because we have these. This is the market structure right here, right? That's not good after an uptrend. So we'll have to continue to keep a close eye on that. And then for context for equities and DXY, obviously, we have ADP, or that was last week. We have CPI on Thursday. So the CPI will definitely be very significant. Although PCE is the Fed's preferred inflation metric, CPI will be important. It's the first inflation print of the new year. And of course, after last week's tricky unemployment report, we definitely want to see CPI continue to lower. Now, the tricky thing is CPI is expected to increase, but core CPI is expected to decrease. So even if we get the numbers we want, I would expect it to be mostly neutral. If CPI surprises lower than expected, that'll definitely be a good sign. But right now it's expected to come in above 3.1%, which is definitely tricky. But the Fed does pay more attention to core. So we definitely do want to continue to see core decrease. So this will be a weird one. Continue to talk about it later into the week, but certainly something to keep on your radar in addition to the Bitcoin ETF decision expected on Wednesday. So looking at Bitcoin, obviously we are moving higher. We basically had this massive, we had a massive rise early last week, then we dipped on Wednesday. Now we're right back to where we were on Monday, Tuesday of last week, right? So if we kind of zoom out a little bit, the market structure is still very good. From just a quick view, just continually making higher lows, moving higher. We've also got these higher highs. We got this higher low, right? So we definitely want to see Bitcoin continue to move up towards this local high right here and put in a higher high. As long as we can put in a higher high even before the ETF, that is certainly a good sign. So moral of the story here is, we did kind of spike up very weirdly around 10 o'clock. But if we can get above 45.2, we should be able to make it up to 45.8, 45.9. If you get above 45.8, 45.9, you should have room to roam. I'm thinking 47K first, just because it's a nice round number. But the next big level of resistance is up here at 48K. So we'll keep a very significant eye on 48K. But it would be 47K first, then 48K in my book, just because nice round numbers and obviously getting close to big time resistance. If we drop below 44.6K, then we will drop down to 43.8K. Obviously, can still keep higher lows in this scenario. We do not want to drop below 43.2 prior to the Bitcoin ETF, in my opinion. So right now, this does look like it'll head higher. I'd be shocked if Bitcoin did not return back to 45.8, 45.9 before day's end. If it does, happen after today's end, it'll be because it hovers likely around 44.6 for then another springboard. But basically anywhere between 45.2 and 44.6 I like, and I do think that it'll end up tagging that next high, or that local high, I mean. And then should if everything continues to trend and we continue to get good news heading into Tuesday and Wednesday, we probably should start to creep up towards 47, 48. But let's see how things react at the 45.8, 45.9 level, because if we do get rejected there, then I have a feeling that we'll end up somehow, back to 44, maybe 43.5 in the near future. Looking at ETH has been much weaker than Bitcoin. And so something that I do want everyone to be aware of, and I'm kind of talking about this amongst friends and colleagues, is, we're kind of hitting what appears to be, what would be a natural bottom for ETH BTC. So let's say that the Bitcoin ETF gets approved. And let's say this just like drops like a rock, like this does something like this, but then gets bought right back up. So then we know, based on how we typically trade, is we can set, we can obviously continue to buy down as we get lower. That's a little risky, but if it drops below and it deviates this 49-cent level, then I would probably enter at this 49-cent level, because after the Bitcoin ETF, the next kind of narrative, the next focus is on the ETH ETF. Remember, ETH spot ETFs were issued. Focus has been primarily on Bitcoin. A lot of ETH high beta assets like L1s, L2s have already been running. ETH is not, and I think that's a lot to do with FTX selling, Celsius selling, yada yada yada. But also the narrative has been on kind of Bitcoin and sucking as much value out of the market, and it's easier to move these lower cap coins. So once the narrative shifts from Bitcoin ETF to ETH ETF, then ETH should kind of do the same thing that Bitcoin did here. So I think if you can get in early, which is, let's say we drop heavily on ETH BTC and then spike right back up right above that support level, then I think that's a pretty good entry long term. And if we just kind of look at the 1 week, if you can get, down here between, 4 cents, 5 cents, and ride that back up to, up here, that's just a double in value in terms of ETH value for that year. So not going to be the easiest trade in terms of stomaching that style of movement. But I do think that, the return, the risk versus reward on buying an ETH BTC bottom deviation definitely going to be good, because if we do break above this downtrend, this thing's going to freaking fly, and it's at least going to make it back up to these local highs, maybe higher if the ETH ETF narrative is a main focus. And so I'm going to talk about ETH really quick and what we're thinking, and then I'm going to talk about what we think is going to happen during the ETF announcement. So let's zoom back in on the 1 hour. Okay, so ETH doesn't look half bad here. Swept this level right here, late last night. Obviously has made it back up to these highs. So this is just basically one large range right here. So kind of similar to how we talked about last week, probably not going to be the best buy until it gets above this 2305 level. And then above 2305, we would look to 2356. And then above 2356, we'd look to 2448. If it breaks below 2252, it'll drop down to 2225, and below 2225, it'll drop down to 2166. So you've got pretty obvious level to level trading here on ETH. I don't know why you'd be leverage trading ETH heading into the Bitcoin ETF announcement. I don't think really anybody should be taking too much leverage anyway, because, and again, this will play into what I talk about in a second, but I think there's going to be a large whipsaw motion, and it's going to kill the longs and shorts. So I think if you're just hanging out in spot, you're doing well. If you took some money off the table and you want to buy lower, not the worst idea either. I talked about that on Friday, and obviously prices haven't done too much and dipped further from Friday into Sunday, obviously back up, but it's still relatively flat. So Bitcoin's really the only super attractive asset heading into obviously the ETF announcement. Still some L1s, L2s, Bitcoin beta assets like Stacks and others, not too bad. But if you're really pumping on the leverage heading into the ETF announcement, I do think you're more likely to get hurt than not if you're not a full-fledged professional. So my suggestion is pare back on the leverage, chill in spot, have some money to buy lower if we do dip lower, and then just cross your fingers. So what I'm thinking for the Bitcoin ETF, and this is assuming that we don't make it to 48K by Wednesday, But let's say let's just kind of keep and say we're going to be hovering around 56 or 46 on Wednesday. So let's say by Wednesday we're at 46. I would expect us to jump up to 42, which would be about a 13% jump. And then I would expect us to drop back down to maybe around 40. And then I would expect us to jump right back up to 46. So I would basically expect a motion like this. Boom, boom, boom. And then we're right back where we started. And then whether price moves higher is going to be based on ETF inflows, as well as if price moves lower. So if we see inflows and demand, price should eventually head higher, maybe after a little bit more consolidation. And if we don't see any demand, we don't get reports of demand for the Bitcoin ETF, then we will eventually seep lower until we find fair value. And I would not be shocked if that was, potentially around 33K, maybe around 38K, before we really found a bottom in terms of that scenario. So, and this I think is going to happen across a lot of crypto assets. So let's say we're at 48K around the Bitcoin ETF announcement. I'm actually going to zoom out a little bit to get another kind of possible area. 53 should be significant. And then I think this level right here, about 57, 58 right here. Okay. So, and then let's zoom back in. Let's assume we are at 48. So probably something like this. Yeah. So let's say we are starting at 48, probably zooms up, zooms back down, and then zooms right back there. So general formation is that. So if we're at 48, would expect maybe a jump up to 58, drop back down to 40, jump back up to 48. So, big swings. We're talking, I'm estimating anywhere between 10 to 20%. I would not be shocked if we dipped into some sort of 30% move. This is going to be a pretty crazy move. And maybe it's not as much as I'm expecting either. Maybe it's like if we're at 48, maybe we only jump to 53. And then from 53, maybe we only, I still like 40 as that support level, but maybe it's 10% up, 20% down, and then, a 20% move back up, but I'm thinking 10 to 20% is going to be reasonable for up and then down. And then, 30, I wouldn't count out 30%, especially from like L1s and L2s, like, ARB, OP, Matic, maybe even Metis, maybe even Stacks, maybe INJ. A lot of these coins can have massive movements, especially when everything is kind of hitting the fan. So I would definitely be careful, and that's why I'm saying hang out in spot. I really think no matter what your risk parameters are, your max leverage right now should be 2x, maybe 3x, unless you really know what you're doing. And I'm pulling back because I just don't want to make any stupid mistakes after what's been a great year. And so I'm just hanging out in spot. I'm definitely hoping for higher. I'm still bullish for the rest of the year on higher, but we'll have to, it's really going to depend on what happens with those inflows for the Bitcoin ETF after announcement, assuming they're approved. So, if we don't see demand, then it's going to immediately translate into weakened general crypto demand as well, because everyone's speculating on demand for the Bitcoin ETF following. So of course we'll still have the ETH ETF narrative, which I still think is going to be a good one, but obviously in the immediate future, in the 60 to 90 days following the Bitcoin ETF announcement, it's likely going to be hyper focus on what inflows and demand looks like for that. So with that being said, we'll obviously chat tomorrow prior to the ETF announcement. Maybe we have some updates, some better insights, some better predictions, but right now that's how we're looking at things. And it does seem likely for a Wednesday approval. So we're just gonna, cross our fingers and wait patiently. So I suggest everybody do the same and don't over leverage yourself, because I think there's still a long year ahead of us with some good potential still ahead. So that being said, good luck, happy trading. We'd love to see you in the GTC community at www.tradethechain.com. There's a 14-day free trial. Get access to the data, the community, the daily emails, the weekly emails, the trade calls, the trade updates, the analysis, the macro updates, the news updates, everything that you need at your fingertips. So good luck. Happy trading. See everybody tomorrow.